one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Through with that double clutch there.
Yeah. A double clutch? All right. So, Clerk of the Board, would you please do the roll call?
Directors Osborne, Veerkamp, Enzini, Dwyer, and Day present. General Manager Abercrombie, General Counsel Polson, and Clerk to the Board Sullivan present.
I know I did that backwards, but that's okay. Only obsessive compulsive people would know that. Okay, so we'll move forward and adopt the agenda. Are there any items on the,
I'll move.
okay? To adopt the agenda, we have a motion by Director Day
I'll second.
and seconded by Director Dwyer to approve the agenda.
If members of the public would like to address the board at any public comment period, please refer to the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. We're looking for any public comment on the adoption of today's agenda. President Enzini, it does not appear at this time we have any members of the public wishing to make a comment on the adoption of today's agenda. We're ready for the vote.
Okay? Board members vote.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye. Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, we'll move to communications. General Manager.
Good morning. I'll cover this also in the performance indicators, but I want to thank and recognize all our employees today. As of August 4th, we've had no lost time injuries for over a year. So for those of you listening in, thank you so much for your effort.
Excellent. We love hearing that kind of story, and it certainly is better for the ratepayers because our insurance costs go down. All right, public comment. Are there any items? I'm sorry. Here's an opportunity for the public to make comments on any item that's not on the agenda.
If members of the public would like to address the board at any public comment period during this meeting, please refer to the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. At this time, we're looking for public comment for items not on today's agenda. President Enzini, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to make a public comment.
Okay, thank you. Now we will move forward on our agenda to communications. General Manager.
None today.
Clerk.
None today, thank you.
Any board of directors wish to speak? Director Dwyer.
Yes, I'd like to thank the staff who helped me review all of our major installations and the capital improvement projects associated with those. It was a great review of all of the locations from Echo Summit down to Deer Creek treatment plant, and there's quite a laundry list of things that we need to do. So we'll get to review those when we do the capital improvement plan. But thank you very much. The staff was great. The plant operators were great. They shared information quite open, and it was a good experience. So thank you all very much.
Great. Any other reports?
Two-
Yes,
two
Director
things
Veerkamp.
Related to LAFCO, at the regular scheduled meeting at the end of the month, we gave direction on the selection of the executive officer. And then we held a strategic planning ad hoc meeting where we worked on the work plan, the municipal services review prioritization, and the planning for a fire EMS summit in conjunction with the county.
Okay.
That's it.
Director Osborne, nothing to report? Director Day? Okay. I have nothing to report either. We'll move on to approve the consent calendar. Are there any items on the consent calendar that any board member wants pulled? Anybody from the public? Okay.
I'll move that we approve the consent calendar as presented.
Second.
Okay, it's been motioned and seconded to approve the consent calendar as presented on the agenda.
President Enzini, it doesn't appear there are any members of the public wishing to make a comment on the adoption of today's consent calendar moved by Director Dwyer and seconded by Director Veerkamp. I believe we're ready for a vote.
Yes.
We're waiting for 2 members to vote. Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries unanimously.
All right. We'll move on to information items. The first one is in operations. This is from our lovely Mr. Corcoran. I can say that
I'll attempt to be lovely.
because he is a very lovely person.
Tell that to my kids, please.
He'll teach you to go on vacation and get sick.
Back at it.
Adverbs are important.
Okay, President Zine, members of the board, good morning. It's good to be back. You have another very favorable update for you today. Obviously, unfortunately, to start with a photo that's not as favorable, but I thought it was telling. So I had the opportunity to take a quick drive down Silver Fork Road, which is the first time I had the opportunity since the fire. And that was, it was an interesting, this is Silver Fork at China Flat Campground, just kind of, unfortunately, a part of the Silver Fork drainage that was hit particularly hard, but you see signs of life coming back, and I thought this was a nice telling photo here. So next slide, please. So as we discussed last time around, all of our Project 184s did fill, and now we're on our annual drawdown. A good chunk of that is actually going to hydro. We're about 90% full in the canal right now, which is pretty amazing considering the hydrologic conditions. Shows how hard. About 125, 130. So. Yes, and then with a little thunderstorm, we went a little higher, but just kind of hovering around that. Jacobson Lake, and as I'll get into a little bit more, is continuing to trend higher and higher on the carryover, and there's 2 main factors for that. The first one is you see a continued increase in conservation of our customers, as well as the Camp Creek watershed continues to produce inflow, which is quite telling as well. And we did have some additional state board curtailments, and actually even after the board packet, some further curtailments, which I'll update for you today. And that we definitely remain well positioned, not only for this year, but next year if necessary. Next slide, please. So these were our storage conditions as of last Tuesday, and we continue to tick down slowly as we draw down both for our consumptive needs as well as generation of hydroelectric power at all district-owned facilities. And I'll highlight Folsom Reservoir in a little more detail in this forthcoming slides. Next slide, please. Okay, so at this point, I think we've increased our projection of carryover by 1,000 acre-feet from where we were earlier this summer, which is pretty amazing when you think about it. As I mentioned, a lot of that is due to customer conservation, which will be on the forthcoming slide, but also we continue as of now about 4 cubic feet per second incoming into the watershed. I asked staff to go back and look and see, in similar dry conditions in the past, how long has it been since we've seen? It's been quite a while since we've seen that inflow. And unfortunately, what we think a lot of that is due to decreased evapotranspiration, the loss of cover vegetation. So if there's something positive out of that, obviously, but that just really shows how flashy the watershed and what we need to be prepared for in the years ahead. But we continue to have the benefits of increased or inflow too, even in these dry years. And we plan only to have minimum releases from Weber Reservoir as usual, unless we're able to effectuate a transfer later this summer. Next slide, please. So this is just a graphical slide of what I explained to you previously. For those online, red is our current year, and that orange right below it was last year. So we're trending a little above last year. In the last quarter of the year, as always, we're very conservative, showing no inflow in the fall, although you can see, as we've discussed previously, in that last quarter, we typically level off and start to climb back up. Very similar to what we did last year, maybe not as pronounced, given the October storms, but we should see that inflection point around Thanksgiving. Next slide, please. And as predicted, Folsom did top out around 90% beginning of June. And it's taken quite a dive, as we expected. Looks like we're about 57% as of this morning. And it's really to meet those delta outflow requirements because of the constrained project operations by the federal and state governments. But nevertheless, we still have sufficient supplies to meet our needs from only local supplies during 2022, and that being permit 2112.
Have they given any indication where it might bottom out?
I can show you actually on the next slide, maybe a good visual of that. They're always hesitant to lock themselves into a number, Director Day, but I think just looking at history kind of give us a sense of where we will likely show. So I presented a few different years than we have in some other previous board packets for this purpose. So as you see on the bottom is our legend. The dark blue is this year, and then I compared us to 18 and 20, so you can see how we're just kind of almost following that same exact curve, and you see as in the fall start to level off a little bit. The Bureau recommendations indicate they definitely are concerned about Chinook salmon fall temperatures, so they're really trying to preserve that cold water pool, but at the same time, they're trying to meet their delta outflow requirements now. But we're looking probably in that 450-ish come beginning of the water year, something like that. Next slide, please. So I think this is a really important slide for today's discussion. Just the amount, it's pretty amazing when you look at these numbers, and the next chart will show that the amount of conservation our customers have achieved. This last month, even though we had that significant heat trend, the lowest demand since 2019, and as you know, 2019 a very wet year. So we were 15% last year, less than last year, and even 10% less than 2020.
A question that,
Yes.
does it, the difference on that means, to me, one, we have more hookups on our water system. We have more customers, ratepayers, than we did the previous 2 years. Could that be true?
Well, we're growing, maybe 1% annually, so that does factor in, but we just look at true raw diversions.
Okay.
So 10% less than 2 years ago, which is our state metric, month to month.
So this isn't per capita, this is
It's
It's-
raw diversion, so
this
we
is-
don't.
It's a raw water.
Yeah, so in
Okay.
theory, the conservation would be even a little bit greater, right? Because we've
Right.
grown over those years as well.
Okay.
But that's the way the state looks at it. They don't factor in growing agencies or anything like that, just raw number month to month. So, as we know, we talked about many times, when we look back to how much we've grown since 2013 and what our per capita demand was back then at the beginning of the prior drought. Oh, I'm sorry.
I was gonna make a comment on the last line. But I think it's real important that the public knows that the staff is preparing for another dry year, and our carryover at Sly Park, our main reservoir, is planning at 60%. And I think that's really important that people know that our drought management plan is to keep things going, so in the event that we have a problem. I still use the squirrel index, and I don't know whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, but they are destroying the pine cones. In fact, I almost stopped and picked one up today. I mean, there is nothing left of these things, and I don't know if that's a bad sign or a good sign, but now I know that Day uses another index.
Corn index, right?
That's coming in September.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, and thank you for bringing that up, Director Osborne, and I was actually going to mention that. So for members of the public, so our drought action plan carryover target is 23,800. So that's what I mentioned, we're about 1,000 acre feet even over what our long-term drought planning action level is. And that's due, primarily to our customer conservation that we've achieved over the course of the summer. Next slide, please. So, and this is just really a visual graphic of where we were and where we are today. So red is 2022, this year. See where we were, obviously very high demands, highest in the past 5 years for sure, and perhaps the highest ever in that first quarter, and how we've really turned that corner, even going below 2020 by the end of July. You see in August, it seems like, looking at least at the recent historical, we don't see much variation. Even though there may be thunderstorms, it looks like that demand's fairly fixed. So we continue to project, conservatively for our demand, but perhaps we'll even tick a little below that, and we'll see what happens. We started off with a nice couple days last week, and looks like we're below 100 down the hill this week. So hopefully that'll continue to show. But irregardless, even if our demand ticks up a little bit, our supply conditions are robust that definitely meet our carryover target. Next slide, please. So in July, our licensed rights for Weber Reservoir were curtailed, although the way that right is, we don't divert to storage after the end of, or middle May anyways, and then permit 2112. But as we described, we were already pretty much full at that point. Since the publication of the board packet, the pre-14 rights were curtailed. But again, that doesn't have a material effect on our operations, just to which water is used for non-consumptive use, i.e. hydroelectric generation, and which water, previously stored water, which we're using to meet our customers' consumptive demands. Next slide, please. And we didn't, June was nice with all those thunderstorms. We didn't quite see those thunderstorms in July, but as we said, even lacking those thunderstorms, we still had some significant conservation. And again, we look at the crystal ball 6 months out, things look a little bit shinier, but the long-term climate prediction center forecast, if you click the next slide, please. We're showing that, I look at so these are various models across the world, actually, looking at eastern equatorial Pacific ocean temperatures. So basically the increased chance of El Nino type conditions above average or near average ocean temperatures, which tend to indicate near or perhaps above average precip. And our most current one is on the right. You see that dark green line, which is the consolidated average of all, is actually starting to go to more towards neutral or perhaps even a little bit greater than neutral after the first year. So that's encouraging. But again, it's 4, 5, 6 months out. So we continue to plan for dry conditions. And if Mother Nature cooperates, perhaps we'll see a more typical winter next year. Next slide. And of course, our outreach. We Jesse and Karen had just updated our most recent waterfront that I'm sure hopefully you've all received by now. And really focusing on irrigation awareness. So as we know, in the summer, irrigation is a huge component of our consumptive demands, and really talking about smart irrigation, so smart controllers, PGS smart. So how to be smart in your irrigation, as well as social media, and really focusing on the outdoor use during these peak demand months. Next slide, please. And that's it.
I have to say, thanks to Jesse and all the effort that goes into the Facebook next door. I see the things pop up all the time that says, water smart, conserve your water. So thank you, well done. The other thing, a question for you, Dan, is what's the status of our water transfer? You mentioned Weber, and that was going to be the main source, I think, for.
Yeah, so I can talk, well, there's two proposed sources for water transfer in 2022. The reservoir reoperation transfer for Weber Reservoir. Continue to make significant progress on that. I think perhaps tomorrow, I'm trying to remember meetings in my head, we have our next check-in with Reclamation. We probably start around Labor Day, probably be about 3 weeks worth of releases during mid to late September for that. We're targeting probably somewhere in the 600 acre-foot range, given where we're at for this current year. And then we continue to work towards the conserved water transfer. This is not it's called a white paper, but it's not an obvious methodology in the book. So I would say we're continuing to negotiate on that aspect. That's probably a little bit longer time frame, but both are definitely still viable. As the board will recall, both transfers, or actually a temporary transfer, is up to 12 months. So our main ditch conserved water transfer does contemplate the ability for conservation even after this transfer window into next year, all the way to the beginning of next year's transfer window. So it's a long-term strategic initiative versus Weber Reservoir, which is as I described, a rinse, recycle, repeat type project that we've done 3 times previously.
So is it
600 acre.
acre feet, is that a done deal?
As long as Mother Nature cooperates, it should be. We're going through those processes right now, a refill agreement, a WARN Act. Westlands Water District, who's a buyer, gets a contract called a WARN Act, similar to WARN Act that we have, to wheel that water through their federal facilities. Having done this multiple times previously, we don't see a significant obstacle that happening, but it does take a few weeks to unfortunately kind of check all the boxes, as you would say.
Okay, thanks.
Dan, you may probably can't answer this specifically, but I monitor the lightning activity on actually about every hour in the afternoon because of my old job. But at any rate, but there was significant precip over Caples and Silver in the last few. How much? Any idea how much we gained?
Yeah, staff follow that closely because if we had the ability to reduce our reservoir releases and take benefit of natural flow, we do that
Yeah.
for hydroelectric generation. Unfortunately, just on the other side of the hill, we didn't get very much at all.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
We did get some lightning strikes, which I was
yeah, we
very
did.
sensitive to.
Yeah.
Not only for fires, but also does disrupt communication. But we did not see, unfortunately, the thunder cells coming in the watershed itself. It was right on that ridge, and the rainfall was
You're
unfortunately,
predominantly
you saw
on the east
Markleyville-
side.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Markleyville got hit really hard.
Okay, thanks.
Anybody there, any other questions? All right. I particularly like the part where we have to reiterate, and this is done by Jesse, who is our PR person, on the importance of the irrigation. And I see more and more people are out watering lawns still. And it's not my place to tell anybody that, but I do always want to boast that I got a rebate when I installed my Ratio smart meter, and it's the best thing I ever did because it does save me money in my water, and it does monitor everything on my cell phone. So if I want to turn on a certain sprinkler, I can, and the benefits are controlling your water on really, really hot days, and on other days you can just skip, and it works out well. So I like to see people more. The other thing is, as old hands have a hard time putting irrigation pipes together, so I just have to find a couple of 15-year-olds to do that for me, so.
President Anzini, if I could just add one comment. I wasn't quite quick enough when Dan was going through his slides, but Director Day, you asked about Folsom storage, and Dan had a visual to kind of demonstrate what we think is going to happen this year. But I did want to just note, in case the board is not aware, that last year the Bureau of Reclamation signed a memorandum of understanding with the Sacramento Water Forum. Yeah. This is an organization that we participate in actively. That MOU set a planning minimum for Folsom storage at the end of September at 200,000 acre feet. That's not a contractual requirement, but it is an overture from the reclamation saying we're going to try and operate the system so as not to go below that amount. So that's important for you all to understand, since one of our most important water supplies is in the reservoir at Folsom.
Yeah, we're fortunate. I just brought this up to help reiterate Brian's point, so that I didn't mention it during the initial discussion of the slide, but last year is that green. And so, we're in a challenging situation this year, but fortunately it's much different than last year. But nevertheless, those targets remain. So thanks, Brian, for bringing that up.
Great. Thank you very much. All right. We'll move on to item number 7, Office of the General Manager.
Public comment?
Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry. Public comments on this presentation. Are there anybody online or in the room? In the peanut gallery?
It does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on information item number 6.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll move on to item number 7.
Good morning. Always happy to share with the board and the public the key performance indicators and goals for this past year and some. Last year was a challenging year, but also a successful year. As you recall, we're still battling with COVID and COVID absences. We had to battle through the Caldor fire and put a lot of effort financially and in human resources on getting that back online. And at the same time, I'm pleased to say that we finished some major projects too that was very critical for maintaining a reliable water supply. Next slide. I won't read these, but this is our mission statement and guiding principles. 100% safety we'll talk about first, and I'm really pleased. Next slide. As I reported to the board in the employee recognition, we've gone 1 full year without a lost time injury. That's very hard to do when we have a lot of construction type people, people out in the field, people out in recreation, meter readers going all over the place, reading meters. So I'm really pleased with that result. You can see some of the results here. We did have in 2021 4 lost time injuries. One of those was a COVID-related one, but the trend you can see, especially after this last year, is going down. The rest of it, we had a few more injuries requiring medical attention last year, but for 2022, we're way below that, which also is good. Same with automotive accidents, avoidable ones. And we still maintain our focus on training. Next slide.
I have a question, Jim.
Yeah.
Emergency operations are significantly more exposure to injury. And do we have any breakdown of what are normal operations versus emergency operations in the middle of the night and whatever, and restores power outages or snowstorms or whatever?
I don't think we keep those records, but I do know when we're working, and I'm looking at Brian Mueller now, I know with the all the work on the Caldor fire and restoration, I don't believe, we didn't have any because it's been a year without a lost time, and I don't believe the contractor had any lost time injuries either. My experience with utilities is when you're in an emergency, everyone is hyper-focused on doing the job safely. So I would say in those emergency situations, we're just ultra sensitive to safety and safety components. It's when you're just doing the routine stuff, you kind of maybe not pay it as much attention. So,
Okay, thanks.
next slide, please. This is just a summary of our control of annual workers' compensation premiums. You can see that we're still incredibly low compared to kind of standard industries. And I always like to point out our workers' comp claims costs were $1.9 million in 2003, and right now it's like $200,000, a little over that. So we're in real good shape, and that's a direct result of reduction of lost time injuries, and even when we do have a lost time, they've been pretty mild. So, next slide. 100% safety also means that we don't have regulatory violations, and for 2021, we've had 0. Great job, operations, in making sure that we are in 100% compliance. Next slide. Moving to the respect for the individual, we don't have an update yet on this. These are still old results. I think some of this, no excuses, but we've been, 1, really busy, and then 2, with the COVID, it's been difficult. I just got the survey today in the mail, or in the email, so we'll be conducting that this quarter, and I can always brief the board later on both those 2 surveys. We do have Labor Management Committee monthly meetings sometimes, but there's not a whole bunch of issues to resolve in labor management. Sometimes we will have them just for brief discussion, but a lot of times they're canceled because there's no issues, and that's kind of a sign of things are working well. Oh, that's right. Jen just reminded me. The survey was also delayed because of the Caldor. I mean, that's taken a lot of effort from a lot of people. Next slide. Excellent service. I always love this one too. The top 3 were always over a 90% satisfaction, both overall on the phone, our phone reps, and the field. Just excellent job. And of course, on reasonableness of water rates and wastewater rates, about the same. When I was with PG&E and Amador Water Agency, they're about the same. No one likes to pay their phone bill, they don't like to pay their cell phone bill, and they don't want to pay their water bill. So it's not unexpected to be in that range.
You know, I wonder after we're through the conserve water and our PR, if we shouldn't start sharing some of the information about our rates as compared to other agencies. If it would be a good idea that, because we fall pretty much in the middle, maybe a little bit on the low side compared to Nevada County and.
We'll have a slide on that, and I'll show you
But
where we are.
I'm just wondering, in order to, if we want to try to influence the customer perception of our rates, I don't know if it'd help or not, but
We can
at
put
least
it
we
out
could
there.
help educate a little bit and say, you know,
I think it's a good idea, but probably not practical, because people might see something in the newsletter from Jesse, but when they get their bill, it's a whole different feeling,
Well, and I just want
especially
to,
this time of year.
Yeah.
just want to kind of like concentrate on one thing. And a lot of the surprise is from new people who come into the county. And we do have a turnover happening right now. But when new people come in, I'm, myself included, was in shock on the very first bill, and that's kind of like why I'm here now. But the concerns are the bill is not, it is done differently. And I think that's where we need the real estate brokers to get involved with this. Because there are new homes getting sold, and when those new homes are sold, they're not necessarily told that they're on EID water or where the water comes from. So it's a little bit of a shuffle here on making sure people are informed where their water comes from when they first move in, and to understand how the water gets here, because it's very complex compared to other water agencies. And it's just an educational forum, and we've had that discussion before. I haven't heard as much complaining since we started doing a lot of work on Nextdoor and Facebook. So certainly, we've gotten some good kudos from ratepayers who have sent us messages saying, we like this information, thank you very much. So it's really important.
You're absolutely right, and some utilities put a lot of their capital on their property tax
Right.
as opposed to in the rates. So it's kind of a mixed bag, but, you know, when customers move up here, they don't realize that, you know, we have 200 square miles of service area compared to like, you know, a city that's so condensed. But anyway, we'll continue working in that area. Next slide, please. This I like too. You know, one, we give the customers ability to do online paying. A lot of customers use that. But the one thing I really like, and you know, Jenny Downey and her staff do a great job getting customers' email addresses, and we use that in many ways, whether it's conservation, whether it's status on the Caldor fire, things like that. We're able to communicate directly with them, and the customers really like this, and we don't overuse it because LL Bean sends me email every morning, and that gets old. But when EID sends it out, it's really important, and customers pay attention.
But not
to it.
every day.
Not every day, no. So, next slide, please. And Director Anzini, you were talking about our outreach program and customer engagement on the website and Facebook and Nextdoor. Jesse's done a good job on trying to calculate or demonstrate the website visitors, subscribers, Facebook posts engagement, reach, impressions. You know, all this stuff is kind of like electrons out in the world. I don't necessarily go on there and give an impression on Facebook. I do get it, but I don't do any of that stuff. But obviously, our customers like doing it, and you can see the results here. So I think, Jesse, a good job. Keep it up.
That reminds me, while I'm thinking about it, there was a thread on Nextdoor. You know how we started a few years ago to, when there's a leak in the street or something like that, we'll put our sign up and say, hey, we know about it, which I think has helped a lot, because then multiple people don't have to notify us of it. But what this thread was about was, well, they've had their sign up for a week and nothing's happening. What are they doing? You know, and then you get all that kind of stuff churning. I was thinking we might want to enhance our sign to explain that we're doing triage, that we're prioritizing, and that there are some very large leaks. We have to do those first. We'll get to this one, these are usually in residential areas, as soon as we can. We may even want to say within the next, give a ballpark timeframe if we have some confidence with it, say within the next 3 weeks, and then if we fix it in 2, it's good. So anyhow, just an idea that I've had, and especially following that thread, that maybe we just, a little more information and communication on that sign, I think might help.
Yeah, great suggestion. I'm not sure I can fit that on a sign as you're driving by.
Well, no, especially people walking through, they walk
Yeah.
over and what's going on, and,
We do have some newsletter articles in there about, prioritization and things like that. And I know Jenny's folks, share with the customer that the priority, and maybe we can add a little bit more, we'll repair based on, priority of water leaks. And the tricky thing is they may start slow and then they get bigger. So it's a moving target, but we'll try and enhance that communication with our customers.
yeah, the more information we have, I think the less anxiety.
Oh, yeah. Especially we get them in the drought. You
Right,
know,
well,
what,
that was part of this whole thread, was,
we don't care
been
because
a week,
it's,
right, yes.
no, we care. It's just,
I know,
we just have to get there.
we've got more than one.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think the next chart. This is something we're still struggling with. I know I appreciate the board allowing us to add a crew, and funding for this is trying to reduce the number of unplanned water outages. We haven't made a whole bunch of progress, but we're still working on it, and I think this is one of our key priorities, is really just keep focused on this when we don't have other major issues that we got to do. But this is something I think we'll, again, continue to work on and have as a priority. And we'll save some of the problems with customers notifying us on outages and leaks, but also it's more efficient to do it proactively than reactively.
So I have a question for you, because I think I brought this up at the last meeting, that I do know that other water agencies are now using texting as a connection to their customers. We have come a long way in the last 8 years by sending email to certain people that are being impacted, plus we're doing the surveys. But is there the raw data is there. We've divided everybody's addresses in combination for GIS. I don't want to lose anybody, geographical information system. But the process of getting those customers who want to be notified by text might be another measure, another opportunity. It may not be missed, but, I certainly, I get text messages whenever I've tried to log onto my accounts and forgot my password. So, it's the same thing. They will always say, "Are you?" But in this case, if there's a sector that's got a water outage coming, notification just via text, letting the customer put their cell phone number in there. So,
Good. Well, I don't know all the details of doing that.
Yeah.
I'll work with Jenny offline, or Jesse can do that.
Okay.
I do know we use text on outages. I believe we do.
You do
But we
use text?
certainly, no, we use the phone and we do
Right.
email. Let's see what we can do on the text.
But a mobile phone takes a text.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of people that's all they're using now. So it's changing on a daily basis.
No, appreciate the feedback. Next slide, please. This is similar to the previous one. We're still at the bottom of the AWWA standards on leaks per 100 miles of line. Not that I like to have the bad news, but it also reinforces where we should be spending our capital assets. And again, the board's been very good at that. On the sanitary sewer overflows, we've seen a little bit of an uptick on that. Nothing draconian yet. Part of it was we see a lot more intrusion because of the drought. The roots are trying to seek out water. And the other one last year was, believe it or not, the toilet paper shortage in the COVID crisis. We'll keep on top of that so we don't exceed a standard, I think, of, and I'm looking at you now, was it a 4 or 5? 5, so we're still below that threshold, but we'd like to stay in at least the median range, if not better. Next slide, please.
I think both of those numbers just show how preventative maintenance pays off. You know, the VACON trucks for the collection system should help. And then if you can back up one slide, Jen. I think that, again, the numbers are pretty large. The unplanned leaks, 635 of those, that's, you know, more than 2 a day.
Yep.
Really. So,
Yeah, it's a lot.
yeah.
But
and we've
again, you have
been-
to, you put it in 200 square miles of
That's a lot of.
service area.
Yep.
A lot of challenges.
And that kind of goes back to explaining why it takes 2 or 3 weeks to fix a little tiny leak when you've got on the other side of the county a great big leak going on. So, yeah, and our task as a board and as an organization is to push that unplanned down and have more of the planned repair of the connections. And as we're doing, replacing the PVC with copper and.
No, we will, and then we'll also make sure we have another article in the Democrat and the waterfront, just to keep educating our customers on that. Next slide. First top one is the fire hydrant serviced. We're still on schedule to get them all serviced every 5 years. I don't know what I probably should have asked Dan this before. I don't think we have very many fire hydrants failing. It's more just getting out there and make sure they're serviced. Because, you know, in the fire season, and everyone's excited about that, it's nice to be out there and paint them and show people that we care and get them serviced.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. That's a great question. As you know, there's a lot of attention because of home insurance. We're just about done doing the first iteration, about 6,500 hydrants. And so I've talked with staff and Knowles specifically about this. Fortunately, we're not seeing too many. And then once a lot of these haven't been seen in many years. So now that we've gone through it's always hardest the first time around, if you will. You'll notice your neighborhood because they'll be painted nice and bright red or white if you're in El Dorado Hills. So you'll notice, when your hydrant was maintained.
That's their color.
Now that we've done the first go around, this next year we think will be a lot easier. Unfortunately, as Jim had described, our numbers have dropped a little bit because they've had to divert so many crews to service line replacements. This is a crew that can pick up quickly and move, right? So if you have a whole traffic control section, you can't just move. So this crew, unfortunately, in many days is diverted to the next line there, and that's why our numbers fell a little bit. But overall, that 1 in 5, as Jim's talking about, we still will achieve. So.
And the bottom slide is the inversion. We want to have 75% planned and 25% unplanned. So it's kind of a work in progress. Yeah, it's upside down right now. This was a new slide. We put it in just because you hear people saying, well, you never read my meter, or, my meter's stuck, and all this stuff. If you look at it, both small and large, 99.995% of the time, the meters are accurate, they're functioning, and the customer's getting accurate reads. Very few meters, and this is in a 12-month period, really need to be out there and service. So our meter readers and customer services folks, when they talk to customers, and the meter readers going out there, they're doing an excellent job in keeping the meters replaced and dependable. I mean, that's a great number, and if you look at the AWWA standards, we're on the top right there. Even though the percentages are so small, we're doing a real good job on that. Next slide. Budget compliance, we're pretty much in line with last year on the operating expenditures. Next slide. Capital expenditures, we're a little bit above, primarily because we spent a lot of money on the Caldor fire. We're getting a lot of that reimbursed toward the end of the project when we're all buttoned up, and we think we have the final financials in. We'll bring it to the board and give you a summary.
There has been a tremendous increase in building concrete, metal, anything to do with metal, concrete. Lumber's come down a little bit, but it's gonna exacerbate our capital improvement plan just because, just the inflationary pressures.
Agreed, everything's going up. But again, we're, based on the estimates, we're still under budget on those Caldor fire expenditures. Next slide. I always like to track this, the debt service coverage, both with FCCs and without. The annual ratio without FCCs, 1.83, meaning that if the construction we're stopping this year, we have adequate revenues to cover all our debt service without the reliance on FCCs. And the annual ratio with FCCs is a nice, robust number at 2.7 almost, and a little above median. And that's really important because I know the board's sensitive on how much debt we incur for our capital projects and how much we do as pay-go. Having that number in the 2.7 range or even higher allows us to do many more pay-go projects, which is important. So it's a nice balance. Next slide. And this is just a slide on how we kind of manage the cyclical nature of our debt. You know, in 2010, for example, it was almost 400,000. 400 million, you know, yeah, I wish. Well, we need to get that debt ratio higher. No, I'm just joking. So we're high and then we go down and fund our capital projects, then we'll blip back up. But when you have a utility that's almost $1 billion or maybe a little over $1 billion in assets in the ground, you got to repair them and replace them. And this debt level is relatively normal, and we have another slide on that for large major utilities. Yeah.
The amount of debt is important, but also the cash flow to service that debt. It might be something to consider for future reports, is underneath that, add another line on the chart that shows what our debt service cost was for each of those years. And I know there's not exactly a 1-to-1 ratio because some of the debt's previous, some of it, and it's at different rates, but at least it would give us, the board and the public, okay, we have $400 million in debt, but what is that costing us in terms of debt service? Is that 20 million a year, which it is about? And as we refinanced our debt, we can actually have the top line number be bigger and the bottom number underneath the debt service be smaller.
I'll add that.
Consider that.
No, I'll add that. That's a good point. And I guess the other point is by utilizing debt over a 30-year period, you're not significantly impacting the customer today for assets going to live for 30 years or 50 years. You spread that cost out to future customers. I think that's also a very important tool for debt management. Next slide, please. Again, Jamie's department and Jenny is doing a great job on our delinquency rate. We're in the top quartile there, and write-off, and even Moody's and S&P ask, well, what's your write-off? And they can't believe it's so low. They do a very, very good one working with customers to make payment arrangements and all that other stuff, but then also not having our other customers have to eat up that delinquent debt or delinquent bills.
With this new federal utility water bill program, would it be in our best interest to notify people that are delinquent by letter? Well, I know we did it by, I think we did it by the waterfront, but I wonder if just as a quick letter to those people that are delinquent, saying that this program's available. I don't know if that's applicable or not.
I haven't talked to Jenny or Jamie about that, but I am 100% confident Jenny's group is on top of that.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Letting them know that that's available, because
Yeah.
it's good for the customer and it's also good for us.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, but it's also low income.
Yeah, yeah. You don't qualify.
No.
Pay your bill.
Moving on to the next slide. These are just some trends over time. Operating expenses still per customer or per service, still going down. Services per employee, pretty flat, slight tick down. Overtime hours in the ballpark. Legal expenses way down from past years, so all real good indicators we just track over time. Next slide. Customer services per employee. I like that as just kind of a broad measurement. How are we doing from a kind of a broad scope efficiency rate? And you can see we have 231 employees, 321 ratio compared to all those other customers or other utilities. It shows we do a pretty good job at overall efficiency rating. Next slide. Here's our water and wastewater rates, and we'll go in the details on this. Director Dwyer, if you look at it, the average rate of similar agencies, $151 for water, and we're at $128, in pretty good shape there. And the same on wastewater has actually gone down, and I think it's been 0 for the last 2 years, maybe 3, I can't remember. But it shows a nice reduction there. If you could click on water rates for me, please. It's a little small on the screen here, but you can see where we are with the arrow there. Thank you, Jen. Compared to other utilities. Now, certainly some of the ones like City of Roseville and City of Folsom that are highly concentrated and dense down there, they don't have the same issues we have. For example, they don't own dams, they don't own miles and miles and miles of transmission lines, things like that. So we're below the average there, and then the red and the blue are fixed versus commodity. Now, a lot of them followed the old trend of having 70% variable and 30% fixed. But you've seen it's changed over time. Many more people are going to a higher percentage of fixed. And it's important because in droughts and things like that, you need to have a steady income to help pay for your operating expenses.
Yeah, does this include, have we averaged in the property tax revenue that we receive?
That's all in the rates. There's many utilities that do get property tax and they embed that in there, and some don't. So we didn't go through and try and allocate out what the property tax did.
But I mean, as far as where we fall, would it, if we included property tax, would it raise us on this chart? Or is it already factored in?
It's already factored in.
Okay.
So if we excluded it and had to raise rates to make up that difference, we'd be much higher.
Right.
But a lot of other utilities also get property tax, and it's embedded in their rates as well. Okay, next slide on the wastewater. Same thing here, we're below average. If you look at on the tertiary treated level, which is the more expensive treatment level, we're in the lower third. The stuff on the left side are secondary treatment, meaning they don't have to go through that ultra treatment, UV lights and all that other stuff. One thing to note too is we're one of the few that has a variable rate component on that. In a way, that's good for customers that use very little water because their sewer bill will be less, but most of the utilities use a flat rate year-round. So that's something for the board to consider in the next cost of service study do we want to stay with the variable rate in wastewater or not? I would recommend we do, just because the lower users really get a benefit out of that. This is the one I also like because of the debt service and the debt we do use. This just is an indication of debt to capitalization. And when we go to third-party review like S&Ps, where do they kind of rate us from an independent standpoint? And what they have represented to us is having a ratio of 42 is, in their opinion, in the strong category, between 35 and 50%. So it also tells me the board and staff's recommending to the board of an appropriate debt level to manage the long-term asset replacement. We're in a very, very strong category. So next slide. So looking forward, these are some of the goals that we continue to pursue. Some have been completed. Top one is pursue the drought water supply with SMUD and El Dorado Water Agency. That seems going to be a long-term project, and be briefing the board over time on that one. Adding points of diversion. We are making some progress on that. The water rights and the EIR hopefully will be in 2023 out for the public review and all those documents submitted to the appropriate regulatory agencies. We haven't calculated what the reduced loss of water by us implementing the main ditch project. We'll try and report that at the end of the year, just how much water do we really think we saved from measuring from the input side and the output side, but it's going to be significant. And that project is completed, and I think the road is paved, so all good there. Next slide. Oh, that's the one I'm still on. Expand non-rate revenue through marketing water transfers. Dan just updated the board on that. Like he said, the Weber one's pretty solid. The trying to get the Bureau to acknowledge that we have rights to sell our conserved water is a challenge. It's in the water right code. Allows us to do it, but trying to convince them that when we conserve our water, we can actually sell it to a third party as opposed to them getting it for free. It's a challenge, but we'll keep working through that.
It's my own comment, and it has nothing to do with management here. But when it comes to, you know, the issues of Weber and our water rights, I think it's important to people understand that, you know, holding that water all year long isn't going to be a benefit. We have to release the water somehow. And in the long run, you know, since the ratepayers have conserved, and we've been able to be benefited of less drought than other areas of the mountains, that this is an opportunity to make a profit for them, the ratepayers. And I think we have to continue to say, I mean, holding the water in Weber for the rest of the year, somehow we have to release that water because we know the rain's coming.
Yeah, and it's going to fill, and trying to monetize that value on the water sales side benefits our customers by having a non-rate revenue come in and help pay for things.
Correct, and that's an educational information that the people who have not been in El Dorado for more than 7 years,
Yeah.
they need to understand that. You know, they have to understand the complexities.
Yeah,
And it's really incumbent on us, especially the new home owners and the realtors. They need to understand how to talk to their their buyers.
When I'm out and about, you know, I do talk to folks about it, and I said, it's hard to say. The governor is telling us we have to have 15% conservation, but we have so much water here. If we do that, we're going to lose a lot of value water just to the Bureau and to the system for free, and we want to monetize it to help reduced your costs. It's a hard communication, but we do have that.
Well, and another way to communicate it, and it's truthful, is that you're helping other people in other parts of the state by sharing the water we have, but we want to get some benefit back for our ratepayers.
Yeah, because they invested a lot of money to have
Right.
that reliable water supply.
Correct.
Next one is, we did execute the new contract on hydropower. Board did that back in May. We're continuing with succession planning and transition. See Patrick in the back, he's one of the guys, and there'll be a few more changes over time. Replace Hanson 7. We did do the contract in March. We're underway with the conversion. A lot of that's going to be in fruition probably in the early part of 2023, but it's going well from what I understand. Next slide. As I mentioned, a lot of major projects, Forebay Dam, Folsom Lake Intake, main ditch piping completed. So that's great news. Silver Lake Dam is in preliminary design, probably in construction in 2027. We'll start figuring out how the new bond sale is going to include that, or is that a separate one later? You know, we have a few years to figure that out, about 5 years, but we'll start putting that in our long-term financial plan. Flume 46 is one of the longer flumes we have. We're doing a feasibility analysis on that this year to determine is replacing that flume with a concrete section feasible, or is a siphon a better alternative and less costly? But that's the one that is, you know, wooden flume. We want to make sure we have a project that takes that into a more fire-resistant water transportation infrastructure. In the Slide Park Intertie, we did get a $10 million grant for that one, and construction's estimated for 2024 and 2025. So unfortunately, some of these asset replacements are expensive, and we're doing our best to get outside money to help pay for it. But once those are in place, they'll last, 100 years, and our customers will benefit from that. The Bass Lake relocation and transition is going well. I understand the building's been delivered. Got to move your head, Tony. I'm looking over there at Tracy. And that's moving along well. I need to get out there and take a look at that. Believe it or not, just because it's a future goals, we'll need to update the cost of service study and implement those findings probably in 2024, maybe 25, depending on when the bond issue is needed. So that's not too far away. Next slide. Always like to push the board on this one, trying to reduce unfunded OPEB obligations by allocating non-rate revenue to the OPEB CERT, but whatever that acronym is. Please just remember back in 12, we put in $6 million, and the value's almost $13 million. It helps reduce that unfunded liability. So just keeping them back in your mind as we get any kind of non-rate revenue, it's nice to place that in the bank and reduce our unfunded liability.
Jim, there is a recent article about CalPERS and their estimates, and apparently they're underwater. The estimate of 5% return on investment is now a -6. So I think, and I'm not sure, but I think our decision to refinance and pay off our current outstanding OPEB balance with the bond issue that we just made, that reinforces that was a pretty good decision, I think, because the OPEB debt is going to grow. Now, it'll still grow for us because as the actuarials go and our current employees, but we do have a bit of a reserve, as I recall, in that.
Some net savings over time.
So I think that decision was a real good one in light of what happened.
Well, I was just going to say, I think that we're still a little bit subject to the variations of the market and CalPERS returns that will, even though we proactively paid it off, it's still going to affect, they're still going to run numbers and say, oh, we want a little more from you, or, which is one of the things we talked about before, that we just have to keep monitoring and each year then start checking and seeing, is our cushion shrinking? Is it growing? That's what we want to know.
Yeah, I think, and maybe we'll go offline on this and look at it ourselves, but I believe the board decision helps minimize that volatility of pluses and minuses for the past past UAL, but it's going to impact future UALs coming up. But I think it was a good decision, but we can go offline and double check that.
Yeah, well, I think when, next year, we're going to review that where we're at, and that would be a good time to look at that. How is the market variation affecting or benefiting us, you know, as far as our decision to go to bond and prepay some of this stuff?
You know, once we get a notice from CalPERS, we'll find out what
Right.
the new numbers are.
Yeah. I mean, with CalPERS, it's hard to look at it year to year because really bad right now, but last year was like plus 20 or something like that. Yeah, it's just, you got to average it out.
And they're normally in arrears too, so anyway, we'll take a hard look at that. Continue with our implementation of disposal of surplus properties. We are pursuing the Texas Hill options, and we'll be bringing that to the board shortly. A lot of the small acreage has been sold off, and we've done a good job on that.
I think that I've been expecting to get a list, but I believe we asked for this about 6 months ago on getting the list of surplus property, not just Texas Hill, but others too. So I haven't seen anything like that in the last couple of years. Perhaps I'm wrong. Did I fall asleep at the wheel?
Well, no, I think it's always a good
Yeah.
thing to update the board so we can have a list of the past surplus property.
And I think I sent you an email a long time ago, but this is just a reminder that, you know, I'd like to see where our surplus properties are.
Yeah, I know, we've had lists, but yeah, it may not have been recently updated, so it's probably a good thing to do.
Very good, we'll do that. We're still in negotiations, if you will, with the State Water Resources Control Board and many other utility partners, and working with them on the Phase 2 Water Quality Control Plan Voluntary Settlement Agreement. I think we'll be briefing the board in closed session on that relatively soon as well. It's been probably 6 months since we did it last time, so an update would be good. Brian did a good job on the census. That's all done without too much acrimony. Rebuild the flumes, we completed that. Again, excellent job with engineering staff, Elizabeth and Carrie and SRC. I mean, remarkable contractors. Not anything urgent, but it's on our to-do list, is a new interconnection agreement with PG&E in 2023. Don't want to lose that. So I put that on the 22-26 goals. And we were also successful in negotiating multi-year MOUs with both labor units. So that was good. Brian is going to be updating the water master plan. That's going to be important to take a second look at that, and then based on that, do the FCC update. I'd like to reconfirm whether should it be upgrading our transmission and water treatment plants to maximize the use of our existing water rights where they are, plus permit 212 up the hill, or is it White Rock still, or is it something else? It's always good to dust that off and get an update for the board. We always look at our debt and see what we can do and refinance it. We did do the pension one, as the folks mentioned, the boards mentioned, with the net present value of $10 million. I'm not sure how many more refinancings we can do for a while with the interest rates going up, but I think we did it. Yeah, well, I think it's just the interest rates now is, you know, it's not advantageous, but every once in a while, we'll take a look at it and see, and our financing consultants give us a little heads up saying, hey, think about this, think about that. So,
Well, and to props to the board and to management that we, and to Mark, who's not here, but that we may not have timed the market as good as we wished for the pension issuance, but we did a heck of a great job on our variable debt, nearly 100 million, I believe,
Yep.
and locked that in at a tremendously low rate.
Yep.
And if variable,
fixed.
it would be climbing up right now.
no, I think the whole review of our debt and the options we and the board approved was very, very timely, very good for our ratepayers. And then lastly, not to forget about with this cost of service study is start looking at what type of bond issuance we'll need for major projects in 2024, maybe 2025, depending on the timing and the size and things like that. So that, next slide, that completes the update of both the performance standards and indicators, but also the future goals for 2022 and 2026. Again, I think we've been very, very successful on meeting most, if not all, of our goals and expectations. Compliments to my management team and the employees out there for helping contribute to that, and of course, the board that allocates resources for us to accomplish it. So,
Can I just make a comment to Director Osborne's question? I just, you mentioned, just I wanted to get it out there publicly, you mentioned the new federal LEWAP program. I just wanted to let you know that a notification for that program, when it went live, went out via email, Facebook, Nextdoor, Twitter, and it's on our website. And I can say with certainty, if someone calls in and they're delinquent on their bill, that staff does tell them about the LEWAP program in addition to our Helping Hands program.
Excellent.
And that actually came in an email to most ratepayers who have an email account
Yep.
with us too.
91% of them.
Yeah. Director Dwyer.
Back to the performance indicators, I'd just like to pile on and say congratulations to Jim and the staff. It's a good report by all measures and under very, very challenging circumstances this last year of the COVID, the power shutoffs, the Caldor fire, to have that kind of accomplishment in meeting those goals under these challenging times. It's a tribute to you and your staff,
Thank you. And the board, because you have to have the board support and funding.
especially the board.
Yeah.
All right, so are there,
Yeah, Laura, I just
Okay,
like to.
you- no, I did
I'd
not
just like
see
to
you.
echo those
Director
comments. I mean,
Vanderkamp.
It takes a team, and got a great team going with all the circumstances that we've been through. It is unreal. That's a great report.
Thank you.
That's what you want to see is standards being met and reaching for better. So thank you very much, Jim and the team. Appreciate it.
very informative. Does anybody from the audience want to make a comment or bring forward any? Okay.
If members of the
regarding
public
this.
would like to address the board at any public comment period during this meeting, please refer to the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. This is a public comment period for information item number 7. President Anzini, it does not appear any members of the public are wishing to speak on information item number 7.
Okay, well, thank you for the information items. We will now move to action items. Item number 8, under finance.
Move one.
All right.
Second.
It's been motioned and seconded by Director Osborne and seconded by Director Dwyer
Director
to.
Vanderkamp?
I think I'm good.
Oh, I thought it was Osborne. Okay, never
No,
mind.
I was just wanting to know if he was going to recuse himself.
Oh, are you? Okay. All right.
Public comment
Yes,
for
thank you.
action item number 8. Option 1, moved by Director Osborne, seconded by Director Dwyer. President Anzini, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on action item number 8. I believe we're ready for the vote.
Yes.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries unanimously.
All right, we will move to item number 9 under operations. We have a report. Can you identify yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Jess Lianos. I'm the Electrical and Process Control Supervisor for the district.
Okay, thank
to-
you.
Today I'll be presenting on the electrical service contract or the proposed electrical service contract for the district's raw water intake facility. In previous board actions, the board has approved multiple contracts associated with the rehabilitation and construction of the Folsom Lake Intake Improvement Project. Today's proposed contract is intended to complement this previous project. Just to give everybody some background on the site, this is the recently constructed Folsom Lake Intake Facility, or simply referred to as the intake. The intake facility provides a critical supply of raw water to the district's El Dorado Hills Treatment Plant. The intake facility utilizes 4 new 600 horsepower submersible pumps on the A side. Due to the large horsepower pumping requirements, this station now uses 4,160 volt, or industry term 4160, on the new 4 pumps. This is a change from the district's commonly used 480 volt pump voltage. The new 4160 volt pumps are controlled by large, complex, multiple section variable frequency drives, or VFDs for short, and that's what's shown here in the picture. There's actually each 3 sections of those are for each pump as they go down on both the left side and the right side of that area. Due to the criticality and unique safety concerns, a detailed preventative maintenance plan is required to protect the district's recent assets and employees. The recommended maintenance cycle from the manufacturer, Rockwell Automation, is a 7-year cycle. Since the first year is under a 1-year contract warranty, we're looking to secure a 6-year fixed cost service plan. This service plan will replace the normally wearing items and perform maintenance on the drives.
Could you go back to that? So just in reading through this, initially, I was kind of shocked. It seems costly for a maintenance or a service agreement, $70,000 a year. And, how often is someone coming out there? This chart throws me off a little bit too, because
It looks a little odd because we're trying to picture a 7-year cycle, but we negotiated to 6 because we got that
well,
1 year.
but also because changing filters and maintaining the battery seems to be what's mostly happening for most of the years, and that's $70,000 a year.
It's quite a bit in the attached maintenance contract on the checks that they do, and going back to the other slide of the complexity of it, they're proposing to have one guy on one of those drives for a full day for each drive because of their miniature control centers that are in there with all the electronics, and they're going through each piece of the electronic that's in there.
Okay.
And then due to the voltage, there's special training that has to happen and special equipment to.
Well, that's what jumped out at me, was that it sounds like the medium voltage, not low voltage, not high, so we don't have the expertise or background in that at this time?
Not in the water section. In the powerhouse section, we do have that, but part of it is, this is almost like when you buy a vehicle to have the extended warranty. So they're covering all the parts that are in there, the normally wearing items, and providing the tech support. That's the other piece of it. So we have that information to be able to update firmware and have that support of the engineers on staff.
Thank you.
Yep. So The recommended maintenance cycle from the manufacturer Rockwell Automation is a 7-year cycle. Since this is the first year, as stated earlier, it's under the construction warranty. We're looking to secure just the 6 years of the service plan. The service plan will replace normally wearing items and perform maintenance on the drives. Next one. Additionally, we are looking to secure the technical support contract that'll cover 24/7 phone support with Rockwell and guarantee replacement of repair of the drives in an event of any component failure. This also gives us access to the software updates and the technical notes at no additional cost. Staff negotiated with the Rockwell area vendor Rexel to secure the best level of service for the best price. It's important to note that that any other vendor would have to go through Rexel to secure these services. In order to get Rockwell, you're kind of locked into Rexel. The district has used Rockwell's goods and services for over 3 decades. I know that comes up from time to time. This is definitely not, we're not new to Rockwell. The cost of the maintenance program is $47,510 per year, and the integrated support is $30,694.50 per year, paid annually. This is a fixed cost with a total commitment of $468,227.
Justin, let me just add in here. So the preventative maintenance, about $50,000 a year. The integrated support contract assurance is more of an insurance policy, I would say, for them to be there 24/7. And for $30,000 on a $42 million project, to have that type of assurance, I think is a real good deal for us, because we can't go more than a day without that operating.
And sometimes these can be something that can be reset through the control centers. And if you have the right people on the right phone, that makes all the differences. You know, we're trying to pump water in summer demands.
You need a large ratio for that with your smartphone. Sorry.
Right.
And maybe just to put.
Director Veerkamp, you have a question?
But just,
Oh, sorry.
some of these contracts, maybe I'm offline, but, or out of touch, but is there any downtime guarantees?
There's
Some
three-
type of solar and so forth, you get those, but
It's 3 days to have them on site, but the tech support is really key for our guys to show up and get them on the phone. They're guaranteeing within 10 minutes and 24/7. Originally, they came back to 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, and we said, well, if we have a failure in the system on 6 o'clock on a Friday,
Right.
we can't wait till Monday morning to get the facility going again.
okay. All right, thanks.
Will they have remote access to be able to see the
They,
same thing?
they will not. And a lot of that's intentional. There's a lot of
Right.
security issues that go on with that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd just like to, the cost at first look says, oh my gosh, $500,000 for this. But if you look at the numbers there, the $78,000 per year, that's not even half of one employee to maintain this and do the preventative maintenance. So it's probably a good investment.
I think I'm ready for the next slide. Board option 1, award a contract to Rexel in the not-to-exceed amount of $469,227 for the electrical preventative maintenance and service of the Folsom Lake intake equipment for a period of 6 years. Option 2, take other action as directed by the board. Option 3, take no action.
I'll move option 1.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been motioned by Director Veerkamp, seconded by Director Day to approve item number 9. Any public comment on this?
President Anzini, it does not appear any members of the public are wishing to speak on action item number 9. Option 1, moved by Director Veerkamp and seconded by Director Day. I believe we're ready for the vote. Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 voting aye. Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
From here, we'll move to closed session. does our general counsel have something to say?
Yes, thanks, President Anzini. We will be considering 3 items. They're each listed on today's agenda as closed sessions A, B, and C. I would anticipate that closed session A will require approximately or not less than 20 minutes of board consideration. And candidly, I'd have to defer to you on the other 2 in terms of how long they'll take. Hopefully not long, but that's up to the board. So I would say we will not reconvene at before 11 a.m.
Thank you. All right, we will adjourn to closed session.
For the purpose of this meeting, we will shut it down, and I will open up the same Zoom meeting, not before 11 a.m., but it could.
Okay, let's bring this meeting back to order. General counsel?
President Anzini, the board met in closed session with staff in relation to closed session A. It provided policy direction but took no reportable action. I will defer to you, the board president, for a report out on closed sessions B and C.
Okay, thank you. And the board did confer with items B and C, and we conducted our annual performance appraisal for both our general counsel and our general manager, and we have nothing else to report back out.
And that concludes a report out from closed sessions.
Okay. Close the meeting.
Tentative scheduled items, if we
Oh,
could just
yeah,
take a
let's
quick
talk
look
about
at that.
tentative scheduled items.
We have that list. I'd just like to highlight one at the very bottom.
Yes.
The board approved the contract to purchase those 2 vehicles. However, we neglected to specifically ask for CIP funding. So we're putting it back on just for CIP funding on consent. So when you see $1 million on there on consent, that's it. It's just an oversight on our part.
Okay, we'll see you at the next meeting. Thank you. This concludes this meeting. See you next.
11:49.
Right.